Hi everyone, welcome back to the next part of our dancing cow painting. So I'm going to paint my barn next. So I'm going to do a little bit of swirling in my water, make sure my brush is nice and clean from that green. And I'm going to swirl 1, 2, 3 times in my red. And then I'm going to start on the inside where it's going to be the smaller pieces. Just going to start to lightly paint inside each of those triangles. When I start to run out of paint, just dab my brush a little bit in the paint well, get a little bit more paint because I want it to be red, not pink. Now, the more water you add to your red, the pinker it is going to look. Now, if you want a red barn, you do just a little bit of water. If you want a pink barn, you can do more water. I don't happen to want a pink barn, I want more of a red barn. So I have my paint well, my watercolor is fairly wet, and I just keep dipping back in a little bit at a time to keep that red color going. Because I don't want a pink barn. At least not today, not a pink barn. Okay, now notice I went very slowly right around the cow's ear so that I did not get a red spot on my cow. Now I'm going to go around the outside edge, or the outside part of my barn. I did get my brush wet so I could add a little bit more water to my red. And again, I want to make sure that my red stays red. So I'm not adding a ton of water. But you'll notice I stop and add some more paint to my brush on a regular basis. We don't want to dry paint, because that's not what this is. It's watercolor. You need that water to spread it around. Just keep moving a little bit at a time. A little bit more water in my paint palette, just so that it can have some fluid in it. So I'll move, and then I'll paint the top part of my barn here. Starting to get a little pink again. A little bit more water in my paint well. A little bit more paint on my brush. There I have my barn. Now I'm going to turn my paper again. This time I'm going to start to paint the blue for my sky. Now I'm going to go very carefully here first, and then up into this area. And I'm leaving this part over here by my barn for last because this is wet, and I don't want to put wet next to wet because then it will mix. And when I mix blue and red, I get violet, and I don't want violet. I want to make sure that my barn stays red and my sky stays blue. So this over here, where I painted the tree very first, is close to being dry. It's not totally dry yet, but it's close. So I'm going to swirl my brush a couple of times, get some water on it. Now my blue is pretty well wet from painting I just did for the 3rd graders on Fantasy Fish. So I'm just going to take my blue and start putting it in, and then spread it out just a little bit with a little bit of water. You'll see that I'm going to kind of move that blue to some bigger areas because I don't want it to spread too much into my green, because then that's going to change the color of my tree. So we want to try and keep our wet colors away from what we've already painted. Because I don't know about you, but I don't want a green and blue tree. I just want a green tree. Be real careful when you get around your cow. We don't want a blue cow, at least not today. We can do maybe a colored cow next time. So just real carefully, and I'll move this, because I like to move my paper as close to my paint palette as I can, so that I don't accidentally drip watercolor all over my paper. especially if I wanted to keep my cow white. If I made a drop of blue on him, then I'd have to figure out what to do, because you can't erase watercolor. So I'm just going to slowly go around, get a little bit of water on my brush, just so I can spread that out a little bit more. The more water you have on your brush, the lighter your color is. I apparently am going for a darker sky today, just because that's how wet my blue is. If I wanted to lighten it up, I would just have more water, but this is looking pretty good. I'm okay with this. It's kind of cool to watch your water soak into your paper. I don't know if you guys have been watching that, but you can watch. Sometimes your water just soaks right into your paper. Okay, my last little bit, I'm going to rotate my paper again, because like I said, I don't want to be dragging water across my paper, or color across my paper. Now we're going to save our two darkest colors for last. Our two darkest colors will be brown and black. Black for a cow's spots and his hooves, and brown for a tree trunk. Now I'm going to let my paper dry for just a little bit. I will see you in our next video. That will be to paint our cow and paint the tree trunk. See you in a little bit.